And welcome back to the show. As the nation faces a racial revolution, many business leaders are faced with the choice to join the cause or suffer the consequences. Businesses nationwide are confronting the issues of discrimination in the workplace long before the COVID-19 pandemic. Gender, racial, or income gaps were persistent, especially when it comes to achieving decent work and economic opportunities. To combat these issues, businesses had to work towards equity and inclusion for their works despite ethnicity, gender, religion, sexuality, and disability. Social justice initiatives can complement and even accelerate post-pandemic rebuilding. Joining us now to share and provide their point of view on this particular matter, I am joined by Senior DEIB and Leadership Consultant Michael Slater, who joins us here on the Social Justice Forums. And Kevin, good to have you.
Great to be here, Daren.
Good. And let's get right into it. When we talk about where we are right now, particularly as a country and a nation, there is this racial divide. But then we also know that the gender divide continues as well between women and men, particularly in the employment gap, particularly in the area of income. Talk to us about where you see things right now.
We're finally at intersectionality, where all the bad stuff and the good stuff meet. We're at a certain type of equity of injustice and equity of what people think justice is. So the clarity about it all is really trying to figure out, what do people need? What are the general needs that are intersections and connected? And also recognize that we've been unfair for quite a while in general. The last 4 years have been a have-not conversation. And now what happens is it's caught up, not to quote Malcolm X with the roosters have come home to roost. And you really have to figure out how to divide it up. The gender issues, though, during the COVID are actually even more so. The majority, 8.8% of Black women now unemployed, Hispanic women around 8.8 to 8.9, white women around 7.5, due to the factor of being isolated. We also have to look at those women, in the most part, are essential workers in every type of level you look at, from teaching to nursing to those things that were traditionally gender segregated. And now we've got the case of they're also taking care of family and friends, and therefore being essential workers and not having enough resources. All the entry-level market jobs, such as waiters, servers, food service, all those things, half of those shut down. So when you talk about the income gap, and when you talk about who got hit hardest, people of color and women of color got hit hardest in the pandemic and are least likely right now, even under the new administration, to get their vaccination yet. So we got that big gap. Now, the race relations issue has never really gone away. We just had 4 years of blatant obviousness. You know, just that I don't give a amount. You know, right. It is television, it's got to be careful. But that whole I just don't care aspect has even seeped into spirituality, where people want to debate BLM and debate if they're Marxists, they want to debate about not being hurt or being killed. I don't know how that's debatable, but somehow somebody made that a debatable issue.
Give me a little bit about where we are in terms of today as a culture, though, because there is affirmation. I'm thinking about, some things that are happening right now, and how, people are rising up. I'll take it to sports world for a minute. You got LeBron James. He's catching hell for, his comments of being politically active. You got the Atlanta Dream, and they now have a new owner now that Kelly Loeffler has sold her share, and she's no longer there. So there are some improvements, I think. But as I said in the lead, it's almost like the culture now is either get with it or suffer the consequences. But there is still some heavy rebellion.
Oh, well, no, the rebellion's great. So let's first point from 1965 to now is a rocky launch. We have to really look at the last 60 plus years, and we always have these bursts of energy. Nat Turner made a burst, Marcus Garvey made a burst, Malcolm X made a burst, Harriet Tubman made a burst, Rosa Parks made a burst, and this is our burst. So these bursts are consistent, but the same thing with these bursts is that we have to have memory and connectivity with it. So yes, athletes and Personalities and celebrities and politicians do it. But this time, the difference in this time is grassroots is stronger and the allyship is stronger. And if I had to give a number like I was in sports, we're halfway there. When I was born in 1958, 10% of America liked me, or people looking like me. Now I might be at 51% or 50%. We could actually almost have a dashboard about it. The days that being Black is okay, it might be half the time. But let's note some things. If I was watching HGTV the other day, and there was the Boise boys that are in Boise, Idaho, and this group in Laurel, Mississippi called Hometown. I love what they do. The prices are affordable, but could I move there? Could I have the freedom to move to these places that are easy to live as a Black man? And so we still have two big questions on the table. What is freedom and what is safety? Those two big questions, and what is economic empowerment for the third? Those three questions kind of still keep us in a box. Now, all the major signs are there that say there's movement on all of it. We have more Black male in college than in jail. We have more people seeking education. We have more Black women with education than any other group. We have more people building their own homes. We have more people building their own businesses. We have people cross-culturally learning how to manage it. And it's not a cancel culture, it's a correct culture. See, canceling means I don't have to worry about it anymore. This is pivot and correct. And my son and daughters, my daughter and my sons, they're about corrected, or we're going to find another method to make this happen. They're about the pivot. Where other generations, we were negotiating. And what we're saying is negotiation time is over.
I want to bring two words into the equation: equality and equity. Many times there's confusion. There is this push for equality, but we also understand that equality doesn't always shape up to mean equity. What does it mean?
So this is real simple. There's a cartoon that a lot of people like to use when we talk about equality. Got a fence. We got three people at the fence. They're all three different sizes. Only one of them could see over the fence to see the ball game. Now, that's equal. They're both at the fence. In equality, the people who can't see over the fence get a box. And they get a box so we can all start at the same line. That's equity. The difference about equality is equality doesn't have to be fair. You can be equally miserable. Equity is about what did you put into it? What is the return for it? Based upon our time, our investment, what we put in, and the plus $1 trillion as African Americans we contribute, we have not gotten equity.
When we talk about not getting equity, the question is, how do we repair this now? And I mean, I know I'm talking to the right person here because we've talked about definitely the problems. How can we see solutions advance in real time?
Well, the first thing is our own self-education. One is, my first thing is always stop beating up on each other. You know, I don't care if somebody takes Air Jordans with their stimulus check. They may have waited all their life to have them Air Jordans. Just stop beating up on each other. That would start. And two, let's practice an equal sense of kindness to go like, what do we need and what do we desire? First, find out as a community what your needs are. First, find out if everybody's on the same page about desire. And then find a menu of solutions. Let's not assume with one size fits all. We're over 400 to 1,000 cultures shoved together. It's amazing we get along at all. You know, so respect the miracle that is American Blackness. Secondly is to empower cities because people want the cities back. And they want the cities back because they're actually environmentally friendly and much more equitable. All the suburbs are subsidized. Black people are already paying the subsidy for other people. So how about just give us what we're already paying in for? We're not asking for more. Stop acting like it's pie. Stop acting like that white people lose something when we get something. That's a lie. Act like it's an and we can make this better. And if Charmaine can't read and Jose can't read and the Patels can't read, we fix reading. First, look at the big questions. What are we trying to fix? And the biggest thing we need to fix first is economic and healthcare disparities. Because if you're not healthy and you don't have the loot, it's not going to work.
Right. And that's, you're talking about an adult. Let me take it from another perspective of academics. When we talk about academics, there is that huge inequality. We see what the public school system looks like. We see what colleges and universities are looking like. Talk to us from an academic perspective.
Well, here's a funny thing about the pandemic. The pandemic has equalized America. There's nobody getting a great education this year. And in that, we've learned some new things. We learned how to be virtual. We learned that people needed to solve the internet complexity. This, what we're on right now, how you're interviewing me, we have the resources. You and I have the resources. Some folks only have their phone and they don't have a good plan. Some folks don't have anything. And so what we got to recognize is when we actually have not just food deserts, but technology deserts, where you can't have interconnectivity. You can't have it enough. And this is a utility now. So first you got to solve how people get jobs, have jobs, and can have that connectivity. The second thing you got to do with education is realize it's a menu. To stop treating everybody learns the same way. Dr. Kunjufu always talked about boys learn didactically. They need movement. They need all these things to keep going. And I use that information to raise my sons because the information was viable. So stop acting like everybody's going to sit still and figure out the 15 minutes, 20 minutes. When I do adult education, I've got to keep moving adults in Zoom every 15 minutes. So why would I expect children to act better than adults? Two, customized education now is at the forefront. We can now customize education, except for some necessary things for in-person learning for people with disabilities, that we can actually make a schedule like a little schoolhouse just for John, just for Jane, just for Jamal, Rashida. We could actually design something for them, keep their interest and move it forward. 3, universities are going to redesign themselves. Because right now, parents are not going to pay you $80,000 to have juniors still downstairs playing video games. We got some realities here. And 4, we have to realize we got this opportunity to just show brilliance by our innovation. We now can open back up things slowly where people go to learning centers and they go for the gap closing, not for what they don't need help on, but what the things they need most help on. But choosing to treat everyone the same after this pandemic is kind of not only immature, it's silly. We can fix stuff even at a lower cost now. Think about how much travel time's been saved between you and I if I had to come to your studio, and if we had to do everything, or I work in 3 cities every day. I work in Washington, I work in Boston, and I work in Florida. I can't do that in a day anyway. So we can use this technology to improve education, give out more things. And I want to say this about Black authors right now, and all authors of color. I've bought more books in the pandemic than I have in a long time. And I will say that people are writing on it, people having voice, people are trying to get that out there. And there's not any reason our young people don't know this right now, unless we're not introducing that. Mm-hmm. And the city of Newark even gave away books with Scholastic, free books to kids during the entire pandemic. Audible gave out actually tablets to kids because they're headquartered in Newark. I only live like 5 minutes from Newark, New Jersey. I grew up there. So we got people who are willing to go that extra mile now, but we need to, as a community, recognize that part of it, we have to be ready to educate our children. I sound so, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. We got to educate our own children, and we have to make sure that the supplies we need come from the infrastructure. I don't need the cities to worry about my moral education for my children. That's my responsibility. I need them to have the structural education of sciences and math and STEM and the music and the arts and expression.
So, and I don't, not to cut you, I want to ask a question about, looking at that, right? And looking at all that you just mentioned, I want to bring COVID-19 into a factor as a factor, too, right? Does this make things, does it make the gap widen? Or are we going to see some things become a little bit better as a result of this pandemic when it comes to the area of education, employment, and closing and bridging the gap?
Depends on where you are. So there are two brothers called the Blackman brothers, and they're white sociologists, and they made America 5 countries. And you and I, we, for lack of a better word, we live in Cuomoville. I'm outside in New York City, you're in New York City, and so therefore we wait for the Andrew idiot. And I've worked with Andrew before, so I can say that, I know about his mean side too. But the whole case, Cuomo and Phil, they get together and say, this is what's good for this folks. And most of us, by the way, benefited from that structure because our numbers going down, everything else going. Now, I work in other states where Texas is like nothing happened. So, will things get better where people paid attention? Yes. Will things get better in Florida? Not sure. And the reason I say not sure is that they're up on vaccines, but they're not necessarily up on structural behavior. So the problem is we still need structure. And what we have right now is kind of the wild, wild west after the pandemic. The last 4 years made America feral. It made it seem like, and I'll use how I define feral. You can feed a stray cat every day out the back of your door, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can feed it for a month. And one day you go to pet it and it'll still scratch you. Feralness is not being used to being treated well. And when people are feral, no matter what their politics, they need a lot more trust than normally is issued. Until we get a certain level of trust in these dialogues, it's going to be difficult for people to trust it. And I'll use a vaccine as a great example. The average Black person already has 5 to 6 vaccines in their body right now. But they want to go all the way back to Mariella to Lax, and they want to go all the way back to Tuskegee experiment. And I get all that. But as a person who's been in 15 clinical trials that actually have been on respiratory, that have saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of asthmatics that were also Black, as a person who studied those clinical trials, I can assure you that there are tons of Black scientists and white scientists and Asian scientists and Latin scientists and gay scientists and, atheist scientists and religious scientists, all trying to get us to not be stupid. And yet we forget all that. There's a problem with the notion of what we trust. And until we learn to trust even a little bit more, that the greater good is important, until we get almost hyper moral, but yet wide open. And what I mean by that is I want everyone to live, but I don't want to judge how people live. I want you to live. I want you to be productive, but I don't have a right to judge necessarily your quote unquote lifestyle. You're a human being, live. We're at that critical point. If we were a science fiction movie, we'd be sitting there worried about, the virus is our enemy. And we should do everything to do that. And we're not doing that. And so, yes, there will be advances. LA is a good example. There's a clinic in LA that is doing everything to get everybody the vaccine. All the review boards, on every review board nationally, they said it should go to the homeless and the people who are doing our everyday delivery, the essential worker. Being in a supermarket was an essential worker this year. The equity between a supermarket worker and somebody in a hospital is the first time. They're on par together. Now, does that mean people will treat it that way? I don't know about you, but people who take care of my food, they're important.
Right.
I'm a 300-pound man. That's not a joke. we got an equalizer, but will we learn from it? And I will say in certain places, yes. In other places, the denial is still harmful. Does that make sense, Aaron?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Before we wrap up the segment, I want to give you an opportunity to share a little bit about your work and where people can find out some of the work that you're working on and be connected.
Sure. One of the reasons I got invited to do this is I work on a project with Bernadette Pleasant on the Emotional Institute, and there's a website for that. And I help partner with her on 400 years of anti-racism, a course on anti-racism where we work for 8 weeks on having people from all over the world chime in with us for 2 hours at a time in that 8 weeks. And we also have Reading with Roz, where we read books like My Grandmother's Hands, and we're looking at caste. We have reading groups. We have coffee with Kevin on Saturday morning. And if it's a bad week, on Wednesday nights, we have bourbon with Kevin. So it depends on what it is, where you have dialogue and discussion. We also have a Facebook page and a website at the Emotional Institute to do that. So that's how I got to here. I'm also working on developing leadership initiatives in Washington and working with leaders on how to integrate in government a very balanced way of looking at it. And then I'm also working with restaurants in Boston and Washington to make sure that they're equitable, especially during the pandemic, on how they take care of people. And then working on some articles for the Harvard Business Review with some people. I've been busy in here.
Yes.
I've been on a lot of panels lately. I advised the Village of Wellington in Florida and Palm Beach on being proactive, not reactive, about designing the future of inclusive belonging. And my target for everyone is belonging. It's not even about taking sides. I want to know what would make you feel like you belong and how do we get there? Because until we can get to that level of trust, we're going to have problems.
Yeah. A lot that you're working on. And certainly we thank you for being with us and sharing. Got to bring you back so we can get to this conversation.
Sure.
And probably, in a little while, look and see how far we've come.
Always here for you. Stay safe, my friends, and be well.
All right. Stay safe. Kevin Michael Slater, thank you so much for being with us here on the Social Justice Forum. We're going to take a quick break. We got more show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back in a few.